Welcome to the mysterious Book Emporium. This week we continue on with more short stories set in Thedas from the novel Tevinter Nights. So why don't you take a seat as we go over the next 3 stories in the collection. Murder by Death Mages by Caitlin Sullivan Kelly, The Streets of Minrathous by Brianne Battye, and The Wigmaker Job by Courtney Woods. Murder by Death Mages. When Sidonie joined the Inquisition, she never thought she would have to go back to Navarre City again. She had received a letter from the man that took her in as a child, a mage in the Mortalitassi, warning her of some mages in his order trying to assassinate members of the Navarran nobles for political power. She had taken it to Cassandra Pentecost, who, in turn, brought it to the Inquisitor. The cause was deemed worthy enough, and Cassandra put Sidonie on the case, against her will. Sidonie has no love for Lord Henrik, and when Cassandra questions why, she simply says that Mortalitassi mages don't save anyone, something she should know. Jumping into the future, Sidonie ducks into an alley, balling her hands and pressing them into her eyes. She had just come back from visiting Lord Henrik, or at least his corpse. The memory of his mangled limbs and gray skin wouldn't leave her mind. She had thrown a fit in the Grand Necropolis when the other Mortalitassi had not answered her questions and they had escorted her out. Now her only lead in the case was dead. She tries to remember what she can of the man, and remembers when they first met. She was a young girl living on the streets, cast out by her mother for being a mage. Henrik had found her in the cold, trying to cast magic to get warm. She was scared at him at first, but he helped her with her magic. In her memory, he was with a younger woman he had called Antonia. Henrik had been a recluse, but that woman was the only person he ever trusted. Perhaps he would have trusted her with what he knew. It was easy enough to find her, as not many Mortalitassi mages matched her description of kind-looking with brass-colored hair. Sidonie marched into the tavern, spotting her reading a book in the corner of the building. She yanked at a chair opposite Antonia and sat down, staring. The older woman kept reading her book. Words were hard for Sidonie, and she couldn't think of what to ask first. Some time passes, and Antonia speaks, gently mocking her that she's still so quiet after all these years. Sidonie is surprised that she recognizes her, to which the older woman questions if it's weird to recognize a girl her dear friend would talk about all the time. Sidonie asks what happened to Henrik, as from the state of the body it was obvious it wasn't a natural death. Antonia then asks if she would like to go to a party. Sidonie is offended, threatening the older woman with magic, but she calmly and quietly says that there is a man who is known to hold the secrets of many of the rich and powerful in Navarra, and he should know something. More so, he will be at a party tomorrow evening. The next evening, Sidonie enters the home of some noble, looking far less dressed as the others. She is quickly grabbed by Antonia, who sweeps her into a smaller room. Sidonie stands out, but she doesn't really care. She just wants to find the secret dealer. Antonia takes a large ring from her finger and gives it to Sidonie, telling her at least to try to look like she belongs. She then tells Sidonie to wait upstairs and that she will make sure the man finds her. Hours pass as she waits in a small alcove, getting annoyed at having to wait so long. Dozens of candles burned at the base of that repulsively opulent Tylus Van Markham statue, casting a dim glow where she had hidden earlier that evening. There, just beyond the reach of the candle's light, barely visible, was a figure standing as still as the statue itself. She could feel magic radiating from the dark form, cold sensations of death that, even from this distance, made the hair on her arm stand on end. She watched the shadow where it lurked, waiting for it to move. She is interrupted by a young man, dressed in an ornate coat. He talks to her about the ugly statue outside, and when Sidonie tries to find the strange figure out the window again, it's gone. If Henrik had taught her anything, it was to recognize different symbols of the noble families of Navarra. She notices a design on his glove, indicating that he is Lord Reinhardt. He begins to rant, with Sidonie trying to find a way out of the conversation when he begins to say something interesting about Mortalitassi circling the king like vultures and manipulating him. Another man quickly walks by then, spilling the glass Lord Nicholas Reinhardt was holding. She tries to prompt him into talking more, but it's too late. Reinhardt scowled as he batted the man's hands away. "Well, it seems there's not much left to say, now that you've blurted it all out, Siros." Siros laughed, and Sidonie glared at the interruption. He was dressed as well as most of the noblemen here, almost as lavishly as Reinhardt. His thick, honey-colored curls were slicked back in a way that almost fully hid the tapered point of his ears. An elf in such finery, mocking and touching a member of old Navarran nobility, and no one batting an eye. This was someone welcomed with open arms and stacks of gold in circles fueled by secrets and scandal. Lord Nicholas then leaves to get something to drink, and Siros takes Sidonie to another part of the manor. As they walk, she is surprised to find so many nobles smile at him. This elf must know many dangerous things. She questions why Syros is able to call Lord Nicholas by his first name, and he tells her that he can because they are afraid of him. He can call anyone whatever they like, and he would never be corrected. Eventually, they come to another secluded part of the manor and begin to talk. He lets it be known that he knows she is a mage, and while she tries to play it cool, it's not working. Sydney rolls her eyes, telling him that she wants one death mage, whoever killed Henrik, and to stop them. When Syros questions that, she decides to be honest. One of them, Mortalitassi, is planning to murder a noble. Syros started to say something and stopped. Planning? He asked. His mouth pressed into a line and his head ticked to the side. I think you're too late to stop them, several times over. What? Sydney bit out, irritation spiraling inside of her. 4 nobles dead in the past week, Syros said as he crossed his arms. His jovial demeanor had faded, replaced by a stern and contemplative look. Sydney is suspicious about how much he knows, but he reminds her that he deals in secrets. This is his job. Before she can reply, however, she hears a faint scream. She shoves Syros out of the way, following the sound. Not many others seem to notice around her, including Syros, who follows her out of confusion. Eventually, she finds a young maid wailing and a dead man in the middle of the floor, looking just like Henrik had when she saw him in the Grand Necropolis. The next day, Sydney and Syros are by the docks. Syros goes on to say how horrified Lord Nicholas is about last night's events, but she doesn't care. Lord Nicholas had told his guests that the old Lord Hildebrand had died from overexerting himself with the younger maid. As if it was known that assassins were able to get into his home, his reputation would be hurt. And with that, he has gone silent on his negative feelings on the Mortalitassi. Sydney is annoyed, but Syros explains that this is how the killer has been manipulating the situation. The two had paired up to help Syros with a job of his, in exchange for the elf helping Sydney catch the killer. He goes on to explain that a patron of his had been having an affair, and kept records of it in a journal. That journal has now been stolen by a servant, and they needed to get it back in exchange for information that the patron knows, as her lover was one of the people who was killed. They find the servant and begin to follow him. While walking, Syros notes the strange ring she still wears. She mentions that she had not been able to find Antonia to give it back, and he wonders why she would wear jewelry from someone who was almost a stranger, and also a very prominent and influential mage. Her eyes were drawn over Syros' shoulder, to another grossly exaggerated statue some 30 paces away, some Pentagast Duke or another. Both its arms raised in supplication cast the street around it into shade, obscuring a motionless figure that radiated the same magic, the same cold impression of death that she had felt the night before. Before she could will her feet to walk in its direction, she felt hands clamp on her shoulder and spin her around. Syros points her to the servant that they are after, and they begin to chase after him. He is faster than they are, so she shoots a curse his way, and he collapses from the horror spell, screaming. Syros yells for her to stop his screaming, but she isn't able to. Something was stopping her. Syros then kills the man, which upsets Sydney. He replies that he needed to stop the screaming, or they could be in trouble. She's still angry that this young man had died, and she had never signed up for murder. Syros says nothing as he finds the journal and rushes the two away from the scene. Outside an elegant apartment, Syros tells Sydney to wait outside, but she clings to the journal. She wants to hear what the patron says for herself. The elf relents, and they walk inside. Syros notes that something is wrong, as the house is dark and there are no servants. Sydney can feel magic in the area. They find another shriveled body waiting for them, and Syros' patron is dead. Sydney is frustrated that another lead is gone, but he tells her that this is the chance to investigate. She can use her necromancer abilities to ask the corpse what it saw before death. Sydney notes that it's a very rare gift to get a corpse to talk, but she could at least try. She works her magic and is able to start to get the corpse to move when she notices the corpse is wearing a glove similar to Lord Nicholas. It's then that she is hit in the back of her head and everything goes dark. Sydney wakes up to Lord Nicholas yelling at Syros. The corpse had been his wife. Reinhardt laughed. How stupid could I have been? Pretty damn stupid if you think I was the one who did this. What would you have me believe? Reinhardt roared. I hired you to kill my rivals and take the Mortalitassi down with them, and now I find my wife slain by the assassin I employed, and one of the damn death mages herself? Lord Nicholas yells at Syros again, saying that after he had paid all his debts to his previous employers and saved him from pursuit, that he would still do all of this. Syros begs him to let him explain, but he won't let the elf. Syros yells that while he was paid to kill the man's rivals, he had not yet had the chance. Someone else has gotten there before him. Someone knows what Lord Nicholas is planning. Tied up, Sydney reaches out with her magic to the corpse in the next room, summoning it to her. The corpse attacks and kills Lord Nicholas and turns to Syros, whose eyes dart to Sydney. He begins to say that he didn't do this, but she refuses to listen, using a siphoning spell that drains him of his life, his limbs turning black. She had waited until night to leave, so that she wouldn't be seen. There was no one minus the shadowy figure again, deathly still and watching. She hadn't expected the other Mortalitassi to accept her apology, but she was grateful to them, making sure that Henrik had reached his final resting place. Antonia meets her there and asks if Syros helped her find what she was looking for. Sydney replies that he had, and Antonia tells her that she did good work killing Lord Nicholas and Syros, something she hadn't told anyone yet. So many people tell me they're ready for change, for the kingdom to be taken in a new direction without the uncertainty of the old royal blood and their constant struggles for control. With a line of succession in such disarray, maybe it's time for the Mortalitassi to intervene. A stabbing cold ripped through Sydney, a chill that had nothing to do with her surroundings. I told you before, Sydney. The people of Navarra, noble and common, know our worth. They see the value in counsel given by a Mortalitassi. Why, I could tell them the Maker himself willed their daughter to jump from a window, and they would believe me. They would find peace in that. I could say that there's no point in examining the crate of wine that killed their brother for poison, and they would trust in my wisdom. She pointed a finger toward Henrik. If I say this doddering old recluse is dead because he's grown too fond of drinking during his experiments, no one will question me. She turned back to Sydney. And when I send a bitter, unpleasant girl to get a two-bit assassin and his upstart master out of the way, she will take them down for me. She will destroy them without even a second thought and show the rest of Navarra just how far the nobility is willing to go for power. Sydney is chilled, and Antonia happily asks for her ring back, and as she gives it back to the older woman, she notices the black figure in the corner again. Antonia tells her that when she learned that Henrik had sent for Sydney, she was furious, but she ended up being a great help. She leaves then, the figure following its mistress out of the Grand Necropolis. Sydney's anger grew. She had been a pawn to everyone, to Antonia, to Syros, even to the Inquisition. But despite all his flaws, she was never a pawn for Henrik. She thinks on what she could do. No one would take her word over Antonia's, and now she has blackmailed Sydney for killing a noble. If she killed Antonia, someone would likely take her place as well. But in the silence of Henrik's tomb, she couldn't take the idea of failing him again. During the ancestral pageant, Sydney watches as a little girl she has paid delivered a message to Antonia. The message was in Henrik's handwriting, something she had wakened the corpse to do. She wondered what the older woman was thinking as she read it. Antonia's face darkens as she turns down an alleyway. The darkness would mask the people seeing what she would do, and the noise of the pageants would drown out Antonia's screams. And before anyone could connect the dots, she would be far away from Navarra City. The streets of Minrathous. The streets of Minrathous were never really empty, even at midnight. Niamh Gallas had been following a nervous young man named Quentin Calla, although he didn't know it. His uncle, Otho Calla, had taken him in after his family disowned him for unknown reasons. Quentin had briefly joined the Venatori, but backed out, and with some recent strange behavior, Otho was worried he had fallen in again. Scared of a scandal, Otho Calla had hired Niamh, a magical private investigator. Quentin paused at a light, holding a gold chain at his neck and seemingly giving himself a pep talk. He sprinkled some powder over a nearby brazier, which turned the flames blue, and waited. A figure in white and beige robes appeared. Quentin began to talk to them, saying that they should tell the others something, but he stops when he notices a broad mask they wear. He asks who they are, but neither he nor Niamh see the dagger coming. The young man drops, and the figure crouches over him. Niamh can sense blood magic at work, and then the ground begins to shake. There wasn't much time, and Niamh tries to stop the figure with magic, but with Quentin's blood, it's no use. Despite her dwarven metal prosthetic below her knee, she was prepared to give chase when she hears Quentin groan. By that time, it was too late to hunt down the figure and save Quentin, but she tries to slow his bleeding. "What happened?" I asked. "What were you doing here?" "I was out," he managed. "How did you—" "Your uncle," I said. It was enough for him to get the idea. "I'm not Venatori," he said. Then again, as if he cared what I thought, "I was going to—" "I'm not with them." "Sure," I said. He reached up and grabbed my sleeve with more strength than I thought he had left. "It's almost the hour," Quentin said. The words sounded forced, as if they pained him more than the knife. She had tried to find any clues she could for the remainder of the night, but there wasn't much. She paid an elf to send word to the Templars. After a change of clothes, she headed over to Otha's manor, which was nowhere near the apartment she lived in. She didn't know much about Quentin other than he had been a grateful nephew and outspoken against slavery in Tevinter. Whatever he was up to that night didn't matter for Otho in the end. It was all a scandal. He didn't want to know the details. The Templars in Tevinter weren't like the ones on the rest of the Thedas. Here, they only step in when magic is used outside of the law, except in special cases where the mage-based Justicars step in, or in the case of bribes. Sometimes, if the Templars didn't want to contact the Justicars, they would hire private mage investigators for help. Neve had taken that job a few times, but it's not something she likes, even if it pays well. Knight Templar Rana Savas approaches Neve, telling her that there was another dead cultist found this morning. This time, Lady Varantis, and a person in a bronze mask was seen in the street close to when she was murdered. Rana suspects, and Neve actually considers, not taking the case. Her job is over now, and she's not under any orders, but she had let the killer get away, and she wanted a satisfying ending. Lady Varantis came from an old family in Minrathous, as evidenced by the wealthy estate she had lived in. She was face down with a nasty gash in her neck, and evidence of a struggle between two mages was clear from the marks in the room. Knight Captain Javas coldly greets Neve, summing up what they know. They had suspected Lady Varantis to be Venatori for years, although they never had proof. She had been very charitable these last few years, which was out of character for her. The Templars and Neve question why a mage would need to get so close to kill the lady, but Neve notices that the veil is unusually thin. It had to have been blood magic, like with Quentin. Neve quietly notices that there is a thin bruised line across the lady's neck, and it reminds her of the gold chain that Quentin wore. She excuses herself to do some digging on her own. She spends most of the day asking around town, but no one seems to know anything about Quentin, Venatori jewelry, or a figure in a bronze mask. On a street corner, a man spouts nonsense about Corypheus and bringing back the glory of Tevinter, a Venatori street prophet. If the killer wanted to just kill Venatori, there were easier and louder victims. The killer must be after something specific, and while it was likely the necklace, what was so special about that? She meets up with Alec Taver, a con artist that deals with information. He tells her that Quentin had been looking into buying false papers to get one person out of the country quietly, although he isn't sure if it was for someone else or for him. Neve wonders if it's connected to his anti-slavery movement, but she isn't sold on the idea. Quentin had meant to meet someone, but they didn't show. Who were they, and who were the others he had mentioned? Suddenly, a man calls out to Neve by name. His robes were well made, and he wore silver crests at his neck. More so, it was obvious that he was uncomfortable. He tells her that the hour is coming again, and Neve questions what he means. He tells her that a man named Paxus was killed the week before, although no one noticed. He also used to be Venatori. "Do you want to know what Aelia took?" He changed tracks again, this time emphasizing the new direction by shoving a round clay disc into my hands, although he kept hold of the chain attached to it. "Aelia's the one who killed them." The man nodded. "They all had one. You can keep it. If it helps you, all the better." I tugged on the chain, but despite his words, the man didn't want to let go. "What is this?" I pressed. "What is the hour?" The man creates a flash of light then and runs off, leaving the strange necklace and Neve behind. A long, thin dragon with 4 wings was etched to the front, rising from a dark sea. Neve had run into Venatori symbols before, but nothing like this. She could sense an enchantment, but couldn't quite tell what it was for. Neve tracked down Templar Rana the next morning to inform her of what she had learned. The Templar examines the symbol and recognizes it. It had been etched into the fireplace of Lady Varantis. She marches to her superior, who grumpily dismisses the case. It seems that a Justicar had been bribed, as one stepped in personally to apologize for the lady who had obviously took her own life. There is no way to get back into the Varantis house. However, the Templars are on Neve's side. Knight Captain Javas tells her that he will work on a way to get inside, but they might need more than a necklace. Neve leaves with Rana chasing her out. She asks the investigator what she plans to do, and that she could technically take the necklace from her, as it's now evidence. Neve tells her that she's going to keep looking, and to consider the necklace theirs, and that she's just borrowing it. With that, she leaves. There's a shop that specializes in knowing about objects that people shouldn't know about. I placed the necklace on the scarred wooden table. The man scooped it up. I could feel his magic reaching to unlock the nature of the 4-winged dragon's enchantment. "Blood magic?" he said. "Yes, I gathered that." "No, not like this. Nonsense, Corypheus." "What does—" But I didn't get to finish the question. "Get out," he said, slamming the seal back to the table and shoving it towards me. "Wait, what is—" I tried again, but he wasn't having it. I don't know. I don't care. I never saw it. Confused and running out of leads, Neve runs into a figure with a bronze mask. There is a scuffle and the figure stabs Neve in the leg, but is confused when her dagger hits the metal of Neve's prosthetic calf. A mistake that wouldn't happen again. Neve calls out to Aelia, a name she got from the unknown man she saw earlier. She says that she isn't Venatori, and the woman replies that none of them were. She attacks Neve then and is able to get the better of her, although Neve is able to block the deadly attack with her arm. Aelia presses the seal to the wound, using her blood to undo whatever enchantment was on it. She tells Neve that Minrathous has forgotten its way, and it's up to them to make it rise. While the traitor's blood would be justice, both of theirs will do. The ground begins to shake then, and Neve is able to push Aelia off before she is killed. The Venatori tells Neve that the hour is here, and that in payment for her blood, she can go live. For now. Neve had the man who gave her the necklace cornered. Flavian Bataras questions how he was found, and Neve points out that not many rich-looking people wander around lower markets or wear their own family crests. The ground begins to shake again, and Neve pushes him on what the crests were used for. He explains that Corypheus wanted Tevinter reborn. There is a demon sealed away beneath the city. It was to be let out, and Corypheus would remake the ruined Minrathous. He then tells her that he isn't even sure a demon is the right word for it. It's something only a god, or something close to it, could summon. 8 of us held the seals to its prison, bloodbound. We couldn't speak of them. The death of the others was the only thing that could shock me into giving mine away. Control that subtle for that long. Unless someone actively renewed the hold, it's not Corypheus was close enough, Flavian said. If Minrathous wasn't ready to kneel, the demon would make sure it did. The hour of Minrathous' return. Corypheus is dead, I said. And the plan was as well, until Aelia took over. The Venatori still want the Tevinter Corypheus promise, whether he's around for it or not. All she needed were the seals. Not all of you agreed, I said. Lady Verantis was one of Corypheus's most devout. After his fall, she had a crisis of conscience. Her devotion to charity and the chantry? Sincere if it also answers to guilt. Paxus, I think he just wanted to be in charge over Aelia. What about you? I asked. A weak grin spread over Flavian's face. I've been a worse person. I'll settle for dying a bad one, or better yet, living elsewhere. And Quentin? Flavian let out a yelp of a laugh. Kala? He was barely one of us to begin with. He was told the Venatori would end slavery. When he found out the rest, a few threats to his family kept him in line long enough. He was only bound to a seal because manipulating the Kala family was useful at the time. In the end, I suspect he was sending information to the Inquisition. By then, I preferred the idea of living over Corypheus' plans. There it was. I had my answer. Who Quentin Kala had been, and why he died. The man offers to pay Neve's way out in exchange for letting him leave, but she refuses, asking where the ritual would take place. He tells her that the only entrance he knew was in Lady Verantis' estate. Templar Rana had been surprised to see Neve covered in blood. She held up half of the necklace, saying that she at least brought that back. She fills her in on the details, and both believe they need to move. She goes to tell the Knight Commander, but Neve objects. With that, she leaves Rana standing in the doorway. Neve is able to sneak into the Verantis' home despite the guards and makes her way up to the secret entrance and into the catacombs. As she gets closer, she gets a strange buzzing sensation in her head and a strange feeling that she couldn't understand and an expansive need for emptiness. She finds Aelia surrounded by around 30 other Venatori, too many for Neve to take on. Aelia herself was focusing all her power into a large stone obelisk. It rose the full height of the catacomb, and there were deep cracks in the stone at its base. Below the obelisk, a shadow moved at odds with the lights that cast it. Looking at it caused the buzz in my head to grow louder. Whatever I was looking at, it was the edge of something deeper. If this was a demon at all, it was older and larger and more nameless than any demon I'd ever heard of, and so much worse. If that thing rose, there wouldn't be a Minrathous left. With a snap of her fingers, Neve freezes the man Aelia had been using for blood, freezing her source. While she makes a good effort to take down as many Venatori as she can, Neve is captured and brought to Aelia. Out of the corner of her eye, Neve catches a glimpse of Rana and the other Templars, carrying Fade-Touch weapons that were rarely given to Templars on special occasions, although she makes sure that Aelia doesn't catch on. Neve questions if this is really the way to help Minrathous, but Aelia continues, planning to use Neve to finish the ritual. Rana and the other Templars attack then, giving Neve the chance to free herself. The shadow heaved as the Templars fought the Venatori. It was darker now, thicker too, but still formless. I saw a steel-haired Venatori stumble near the writhing darkness. Before he could straighten back up, the shadow was wrapped around his wrists. The cultist jerked to his knees, his body convulsed. Silence fell suddenly on both sides, broken by the screams of the old man as he sunk from view. Aelia continues the ritual, using more of her own blood to power it. However, one swift punch in the nose from Neve disrupts her connection, and the magic blasting them both back, and the ritual is broken, the shadow disappearing. Rana grabs Aelia now, dragging her to her feet. I knew what would happen next. The demon, or whatever it was, would be sealed. No one would talk much about it, because doing so would admit the Venatori still had too much power. Some of the Venatori would face their crimes, others would claim they were victims of blood magic control. The ones who had money would find that it was enough of an excuse. It was still dark when we left the catacombs. The city was hushed, if hardly sleeping, with no idea what had happened. Minrathous is broken, Aelia spat at me. I know, I said, but you aren't the ones to fix it. Otho Kalla is confused to find Neve bothering him before sunrise. She tells the man that he wasn't wrong to give Quentin another chance, that he had left the Venatori, and that there was nothing unsavory in his last days. Otho questions if it even matters, and Neve replies that it might to him. She just wanted to tell him the truth. She turns to leave, and he calls out to her, asking why he didn't just tell him. Neve knows that he couldn't because of the magic he was under, but did he even want to? Did he try and Otho didn't listen? Does that all even matter now? She tells him that she doesn't really know, and walks away. The Wigmaker job. In Byrantium, Ambrose Forfex prepares for the wig show of the season. He admires the flawless hair he has collected as he is interrupted by two hooded figures. Crispin Cavlo and Felicia Aramond, two Altus in the Venatori, tell the Wigmaker that he needs to cancel the show, as the Antivan Crows are after him. Forfex isn't worried. He believes that the danger of the Crows is just Antivan propaganda, but the other two insist that the danger is real, as they have killed 8 other Venatori members. He still waves off the threat until Felicia points out that the man who has taken his contract is Lucanus de la Morte. Forfex accidentally breaks the glass he was filling up, cursing at the name as goosebumps pebble his neck. In a small inn in Byrantium, Lucanus and his cousin Ilario de la Morte prepare for the night. "You're not wearing that, are you?" Ilario asked, while admiring his own reflection. Lucanus glanced down at his ensemble. The jet leather greatcoat and black-on-black suit might not have been conspicuous during the day, but for a night job it was the tactical choice. He compared his outfit to his cousin's high-collared navy and gold tunic. It was something an Antivan thought a Vint would wear. "At least I don't look like a tourist," he replied, a faint smile tugging on his lips. Ilario spritzed his hair with oil and slicked it back with both hands. "No, you look like you're attending a funeral." "Very funny," Lucanus said flatly and returned to sharpening his blade. "It's a job, not a party." "Actually, it's a job at a party. Might as well look our best." Ilario flicked open a straight razor to trim an errant follicle of stubble that was ruining an otherwise pristine 5 o'clock shadow. Ilario grumbles that they should be heading home by now, as they received a call from the first Talon of the Crows to come home. The first Talon also happened to be Caterina de la Morte, their grandmother. For years, Lucanus had hated his grandmother, as much of his training involved her abusing him. But as he got older, he realized that a lot of her cruelty was to prepare him for this way of life, also that he could survive. The two men talk about who will take the elderly Caterina's place in the Crows. Ilario points out that Lucanus is the favorite for the title, although he doesn't really want it. He asks his cousin if he would turn down the offer if it was given to him, but Lucanus hears a noise. He had bought out the whole floor, so no one should be creeping up here, and he had made it known that no servant should come up the stairs. Plus, the footsteps were too careful, which left the Venatori. Ilario and Lucanus hold a meaningless conversation as they prepare for the intruder. In 3 quick, silent strides, Lucanus positioned himself next to the suite's entrance. He could hear someone breathing on the other side. Their gloved fingers hugged the wall for cover. Lucanus could have laughed. People put too much faith in walls. Rearing back, he thrust his sword through the wood and plaster until it hit bone and kept going. A shriek echoed through the hall, followed by a thud. Lucanus stood and stalked through the door. A hooded man, wiry and mustached, was trying to pull his impaled hand free. A mage's staff lay next to him. The mage tries to cast a spell, which always makes the back of Lucanus' eyes twitch, but he's able to slam the mage's head into the wall, stunning him. The two men drag and tie up the Venatori in the room. He begins to say that he won't talk, even if he's tortured, but Lucanus says that he didn't really have time for torture anyway, and kills him. Ilario complains that he wouldn't have tied him up if he was just going to be killed, and that his cousin needs to try and not stain another one of his nice suits. Searching through his pockets, they find a note calling for the killing of the crows who are after Forfex, saying that anyone who does so will walk with the Wigmaker when they enter the Black City. The two men joke that it doesn't really seem like a great prize, and that the Wigmaker is going to be disappointed that they will be crashing his party anyway. As they leave the tavern, Lucanus gives the innkeeper a large amount of money, telling her it's for the mess. Ilario points out that it's likely she was the one who told the Venatori where they were, but Lucanus says that innkeepers like to gossip, and next time the Venatori want information on the crows, the local innkeepers will know who pays better. Ilario asks what the plan is, and Lucanus is vague on the details, taking his cousin through a detour of the city. He comes to a statue of a burned Venedal, in memory of a failed slave rebellion that the local nobles keep up in the alienage, and he pushes a hidden button. The two men walk down a secret passage. At the bottom, they found an elf in a scarlet coat guarding a large steel door. She greeted Lucanus with a cordial smile. Master de la Morte, and... Her friendly facade faltered as she spotted Ilario. Master de la Morte the Lesser, Ilario offered with a grin. My cousin, Lucanus clarified. Appeased, the elf asked, Where does your business take you tonight? Up. She nodded, Lucanus planting his feet firmly on the ground. The elf clapped her hands together, snuffing out the balefire. The room began to spin, gently at first, then faster. Lucanus bit back a laugh as Ilario held out an arm to steady himself. A few seconds later, the room slowed to a stop and the balefire burned once more. The elf opened the door to reveal another spiral staircase. Ilario presses who the person who put the contract down is, but Lucanus doesn't honestly know. It's not his job to know. If people want to pay him to kill racist blood mages, he's not going to ask many questions. The two men find themselves walking on Verantium's famed floating aqueducts towards the Wigmaker's estate. Below, they could see all sorts of people heading towards the party, dressed in brightly colored costumes. No one would see the two crows, though, as it seemed no one ever bothered to look up. The two men jump down on the roof of the estate and spy on the party below. Lucanus finally sees Forfex in the crowd, and a woman all dressed up runs towards him. He recognizes her as Camille Spina, the captain of Forfex's guard, in disguise so that she could walk the party with ease. She whispers in the Wigmaker's ear, and he is rushed into the house. They know the crows are here. Ilario notes how beautiful she looks, and Lucanus tells him that she has a key he needs to get to their mark. From the rooftop, Lucanus watches his cousin slink through the party with ease, looking like he belonged. He makes his way to Camille, giving a groan-worthy pickup line that somehow works. With ease, Ilario slips the keys from the guard and places them on an unknowing servant's tray. Lucanus rushes from the rooftop and is able to suspend himself from a pillar just in time to grab the keys. He then heads towards the door that Forfex disappeared into. Inside, he's able to dispatch the guards that protect the room where Forfex is in. Ilario is able to kill the final guard, and the two banter a bit, wondering if they should hide the bodies before completing a kill. However, at the end of the hall, a thin, elven woman gapes at the scene. She is sickly looking, her hair looking like it had been plucked out. One of the Wigmaker's slaves. The young woman begs for the crows to spare her. Lucanus asks for her name. It's Effie. He asks about her hair, and she tells him that her master pulled it out when he found that she had split ends. Lucanus tells her that she didn't see anything, telling her to leave. Before she does, she asks if they will kill her master, and he confirms this, and she seems pleased. Ilario is confused, as her next master could be worse, but she points towards the door where Forfex is in. They will see. The two take the keys off one of the guards, opening the door to a basement, and as they ascend down the stairs, it becomes warmer. Row after row, men and women were chained to the ceiling in tidy formations, their heads lolled forward between straining shoulders. Cascades of hair tumbled past amputated knees to settle in pools of silver, black, gold, and copper. A shiny, terrible rainbow of hair. Lucanus approached the first row. Up close, he noticed their skin had turned an ash gray and was spotted with crystallized sores. Gently, he pushed the hair from one of their faces. The man's mouth was sewn shut, his eyes milky. He twisted towards Lucanus. All at once, the room became aware strangers were present. One by one, they moaned a horrifying chorus of despair. The two men are horrified at what they see, and the moans become louder. Lucanus makes a move to break the shackles, but Ilario stops him. A humming sound can be heard in the back of the room. Carefully, the two men make their way to the humming, finding Forfex carefully talking to one of his prisoners. Lucanus can see that the poor man's arms are dislocated. The Wigmaker whips up a small concoction of red lyrium, snipping the bindings of the man's lips so that his jaw falls open, and pours it into the prisoner's mouth. Lucanus remembers the dead eyes of the models and how thin the veil felt here. This explains it. But how is this place not riddled with demons? He looks up to find an elven artifact humming green above the room. He had heard of these, artifacts that strengthened the veil. Forfax gets ready to leave the room, and Ilario makes a move to kill the man, but Lucanus stops him, forcing his cousin to hide. Ilario is confused at his behavior, and when Forfax is gone, Lucanus says that he doesn't deserve a quick death. Ilario questions about the mess of bodies, but Lucanus doesn't care. He wants him scared. Ilario notes that they can't save these people. Red lyrium has destroyed them. Lucanus agrees, but he replies that he can give them vengeance. With that, he climbs onto the cage holding the elven artifact and smashes it. There is a moment of silence, then madness. The two men race upstairs, Ilario upset that they now have to deal with a house full of demons. They reach the top of the stairs and are shocked when they don't hear any sounds of alarm or see dead bodies. In their place is the sound of a mop and Effie. "Where are the bodies?" Ilario asked. Effie shrank into herself. "I moved them." "Not by yourself, you didn't." He turned to Lucanus, a smug sneer on his face. "I told you she'd talk." "Only to the other slaves, please," she pleaded to Lucanus. "I didn't tell them what you looked like, only that you're here. They wanted to help." She squared her slight shoulders. "You promised to kill him." "And you promised to keep your mouth shut," Ilario chided. Back down the hall, something wet slammed against the studded door. Effie's bravado crumbled. "What was that?" "Take her," Lucanus told Ilario. "Find the others." "Other what?" His eye started to the elf. "Slaves? Absolutely not." Behind them, a second fleshy thud echoed, then a third, and a fourth. Lucanus continued as if Ilario had agreed. "There's a statue with a passage, like the one we used before. It's not far. You should be able to escape in the chaos." Eventually, Ilario agrees, and Lucanus rushes towards the party where screams begin to ring out. He finds Forfax surrounded by hair, screaming at his guard captain to rip the wigs off the demons, while her arms were getting sliced open for her efforts. Not getting the results he wanted, he pushes her in the way of a demon, killing her and using her blood to kill more demons to save any hair he can. Lucanus finally calls out to the Venatori and mocks him. The demons from the workshop finally join the rest of the party then, and Forfax takes Camille's corpse, using the rest of her blood. Lucanus is able to throw a knife to take off four of Forfax's fingers on his dominant hand. The crow mocks Forfax that he won't be able to work his craft without those fingers. The Wigmaker's face crumbles into hopelessness, shouting at Lucanus that he hopes one day his work will be turned against him. Suddenly, Forfax's voice is no longer his own, and he begins to eat the hair he has collected, the razor-sharp strands shredding his jaw, his body twisting into a sort of spider creature. Lucanus runs, with the now-possessed Forfax chasing after him. Demonic legs puncture the crow's hip, bicep, and thigh, yet he still is able to make it onto the roof, breaking only a few ribs in the process. Looking over the ledge, the demons from the workshop circle Forfax now. Lucanus takes out his sword, jumps off the roof, and slashes the former Wigmaker's sternum in half, killing him. The other demons are still, and Lucanus calls out to them, saying that they now have their vengeance, and with the source of their anger gone, the other demons dissolve away, and the party is silent. The contract is complete. Lucanus reaches the docks before dawn, just in time for the ship him and his cousin need to take. He picks the closest tavern that looks the nicest, one called the Nug Queen, and looks for Ilario. The bartender barks at Lucanus to leave as the man is still wounded from the fight, but Ilario is able to bribe him enough to let his cousin in. The two share a drink while catching up. Ilario was able to get Effie and the others out, and Lucanus killed the Wigmaker. Ilario asks if he needs a healer, but his cousin refuses one. Magister Zara Inata stood naked in front of a mirror. This was her morning routine, to examine every inch of her body for flaws, 3 servants holding various looking glasses and prepared to bleed for her beauty. A knock on the door interrupts her this morning, and Crispin Cavlo and Felicia Aramon enter. While both obviously notice her nakedness, neither say a word about it. She assumes that Forfax is dead, and the other 2 Venatori fill her in on the details. Around 40 dead, that Lucanus likely had help, and it will be hard to keep this disaster from the public. They also tell her that she is likely the next target. "Don't be. I'm not a fool like Ambrose. A true Maleficar knows demons cannot be killed, only controlled. If this crow fancies himself a demon, then I look forward to using him into his full potential." "How?" Crispin asked. "Never underestimate the power of observation," Zara lectured. "I'll keep a low profile. That should entice him to move on to more exciting prey. But he'll continue killing Venatori," Felicia pointed out. "For which he'll be duly punished. In the meantime, we practice patience." Zara paused to marvel at herself. Every feature and proportion were in perfect symmetry, and yet, when she smiled, there was something ugly behind it. Freeing Ambrose's slaves already tells us the crow has a heart. He will reveal other flaws, and we will exploit every last one of them. Discussion. First, a huge thank you to Sarah for sending in these 2 lovely drawings of Ilario and Lucanus. Sarah mentioned that she didn't have a large online presence, but she did ask me to link to her YouTube account. So if you can, go send her some love that way. Second, I also want to apologize for this video being, very late. Life just happens and we're just gonna have to deal with it. But I am pushing back the dates for future videos and when I'm accepting submissions from you guys. I've already edited the spreadsheet, which is linked down below, and I'll announce the new acceptance date for the next section at the end of this video. So first, if you've never played the Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer, then you probably don't recognize Sydney. While she does appear in War Table missions as well, it's only if you choose specific options, so it's possible to miss her entirely. Of the 2 she is in, one is talking about how she went to Tevinter pretending to be Magister's assistant to help her get the real name of Corypheus Verdorian, and the other is basically that one part in Lord of the Rings when the magic advisor takes over the mind of the king, but in this scenario the king is the king of Navarra and the bad guy is from the Venatori. If you send Josephine, she sends Sydney to basically do what Gandalf did, and the king thanks the Inquisition for clearing the clowns from his mind.
Great. I'm so happy for you. Now go away.
My point with all of this is that there is a chance that this story is the second time that Sydney has actually been to Navarra City for the Inquisition, despite her making it seem like it was the first. That, or the story is actually set a lot earlier than I think, given that this War Table mission is unlocked when the Inquisition's influence has risen to level 5, which many can do before reaching Skyhold, and after the attack on Haven. Or even that sending Liliana Arcullen, who sends other Inquisition multiplayer characters, is the Bioware canon for this very small choice. Speaking of, if we try to line up all these stories in chronological order, I think it's very likely that this is one of the earliest stories, as the Inquisition is still around and Cassandra is not divine, making this a pre-Trespasser story. Assuming that the War Table mission just isn't canon for Sydney, it would mean that this story takes place at the very latest, not long before or after the end of the main game. Also, for those that don't know Cassandra's backstory very well, there is a small nod to it at the start of the story, when Sydney mentions that she's to know that Mortalitassi don't save people. The reason she says that is that when Cassandra's parents were killed for political reasons, her and her older brother went to stay with an uncle who was a Mortalitassi mage. Her uncle was distant from them, and a lot of her distaste for Navarra comes from her years there. In short, her and Sydney have very similar backstories, except Cassandra was rich and able to get out while she was still very young, while Sydney stayed for many more years with no money to speak of. When Sydney is being talked to by Lord Reinhardt, he says this: "We can't even walk the streets in peace without the Van Markhams' constant desperate reminders that their station is far above our own. If they lived in the present like the rest of us, maybe they'd have more to contribute to the country than plotting against every other noble family in between drunken alley spats." While it's not very concrete, and maybe this is actually something that happens a lot, it's possible that he's talking about the earlier short story, Down Among the Dead Men. If you have forgotten or skipped over that one, the cause of the story is that a noble from the Karn family gets into a drunken alley fight with his rival, a noble from the Van Markham family. Both men end up dying in a scuffle. To really highlight Lord Reinhardt's point, Karn ends up getting possessed by a pride demon in an attempt to destroy more of the dead Van Markham, showing that the older families really only care about defeating each other. Speaking of Lord Reinhardt, you may recognize that name. In truth, it's little more than a name that has reappeared in the series a few times. In Dragon Age 2, Hawke's mother questions Gamlen if their estate was bought by the Reinhardt family. In the world of Thedas, the love of Gamlen's life would later work for the Reinhardts when the Amel family fell apart. The family's talked about a little bit more in this story, where it's mentioned to be a minor family, but one of the oldest in Navarra, although they have family in both Free Marches and Orlais, and their symbol is a quill. Lord Hildebrand, the old man who was murdered in Lord Reinhardt's home, also might have someone we have a connection to as well. In Cassandra's quest in Inquisition, you have to travel around and fight mages who would have been hunted by the Templars. One of the mages is Sir Hildebrand, which is close, but has an extra T on the end. This is honestly probably nothing, but just something to keep in mind, I guess. Okay, I have a very silly and small point on Cyros that very likely has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but unfortunately is going to have to wait until the last episode again, so another pin to get to later down the road. When Cyros and Sydney try to wake up the corpse to get it to talk, Sydney makes an interesting distinction. There's a difference between getting a corpse to talk about its final moments and possessing a corpse with a spirit in hopes that the spirit will latch onto the memories of the person and talk about those. The former is likely seen in the Gator comics, where Yavanna, the Witch of the Wilds, is able to get a dead man to talk. The latter is something I don't believe we have really seen in connection to necromancy, although something like the spirit that has latched onto Talana's memory in the Inquisition DLC Draws of Hakon seems to be the closest, although I'm not quite sure it's the same as no bodies being possessed. So it's thrown in at the very end, but let's talk about the Navaran Autumn Ancestral Pageants. There's a little blurb about it in the World of Thedas, but the gist is that the Navarans love history and heroes, and this day is dedicated to celebrating both. Actors will act out famous stories, nobles will decorate statues of the honored dead, and there are also some rumors that the Mortalitassi will do something special at night, although that's apparently secret. So, there are two parts of the story that sort of bother me. The first, almost everyone I've talked to about the story either mildly or passionately dislikes Sydney. And I do too, for the record. I've heard some blame thrown at the author for the story, but I would like to come to her defense. Sydney sucks just as much in the Inquisition multiplayer banter as well. After having read a lot of it on the wiki, Kelly does a good job expanding her sourness out to a full story. To get the idea of what I mean, here are a bunch of screenshots of some of the worst Sydney quotes that she has in the Inquisition multiplayer. She's mean-spirited, constantly grumpy, and most of the other Inquisition multiplayer characters actively dislike her. The only complaint I have about how she was written was that in Inquisition multiplayer banter, there is one line about her wanting to plan before an attack, while the whole story seems to be her, rushing head-on into danger. And really, that's kind of a minor complaint. But other than her being from Navarra, I'm not sure why you would choose her to be the central protagonist in a story. She seems to work a lot better as the grumpy one in the group to level out everyone else being so nice. I think Kelly does a good job on keeping Sydney's character and creating an interesting mystery about the nobles in Navarra, but I think the two just get in the way of each other, causing a lot of frustration for the reader. The second thing that bothers me is that to wrap up the mystery for the reader, Antonia had to do something stupid. She had completely gotten away with it. Sydney had honestly believed that killing Syros and Lord Nicholas solved all her problems, despite that not making any sense. And I think we could all believe that Sydney would believe that as well, as she seems to jump to conclusions during the whole story. But then, in a very, I almost want to say out-of-character move, Antonia takes all her careful planning and throws it out the window to tell Sydney how smart she is. There was no reason to let Sydney know she was fooled, other than to gloat, and it's what ended up getting her killed. And on top of that, now both Sydney and the reader have no idea what's really going on, and Sydney just decided to kill Antonia because she killed Henrik, and let Navarra be damned if someone else steps in. So while Sydney might be a talented mage, she essentially is terrible to work with. She complains about her orders, and is a poor agent to the Inquisition. I feel like the general gist of the story is that Sydney shouldn't have been fired from the Inquisition, and we need to send someone else to Navarra ASAP. So right at the start, remember that last episode where I mentioned that the mages in Dorian and May's card game mention a few other stories in the novel? This is one of them, although it was mentioned by one of the mages and the links he went to with his nephew Quentin in Luck of the Gardens. One of the more odd references at the start of the story is that Neve, while not on the side of the Venatori, doesn't seem to be thrilled with the Inquisition either. It's never brought up in the story again, but from how she talks about the Venatori, she seems fed up with fanatics. And we know for a fact that the Inquisitor has fanatics of their own. So while I'm not positive, I would put money on her annoyance being based on that. This short story is our first real look at the Tevinter Templar Order. While we knew it was a shadow of its southern self, it's good to finally get details. They are ruled over by another group called the Justicars, which from the story we know are mage-based, and I'm not quite sure what their full name is, as it's never really capitalized. This is also the first time we've heard of this mage order, and we really don't know much on them other than they seem to be just as corrupt, taking bribes from major families. These Templars also don't take lyrium, and while they can use special anti-magic weapons, they need special orders to do so. It seems like everyone is both frustrated with how things are ran in the Order and accepting that they are mostly just useless, as a major part of the story seems to be the Templars coming in use for once and surprising everyone, seemingly even themselves. We do learn a bit about Neve's history as well. She seems to be doing well enough to not need to take cases based on how much they would pay, and that she rents a room above a bookstore. Her family has more Templars than mages, and she doesn't come from a well-to-do background. She also likes fried fish and uses a lot of cold-based magic. So the con artist that Neve meets has a full name and a small backstory, in that he had gone to jail and almost killed Neve at one point. There isn't much to say on Elec Taver other than I find it odd that much work was put into a character that is there for less than a page. I almost want to say that he could show up as an NPC in Dragon Age 4 for that, but otherwise I'm not sure why that much detail was given to this random guy. Let's also talk about the symbol, a thin, four-winged dragon rising from a dark sea. I really don't have much on that symbol other than a vague shot in the dark from the Dragon Age RPG. In the Dragon Age RPG, there's a sea monster called the Cetus. It's a real mythological figure, and neither the game art nor the historical art includes any wings at all. Really, in historical art, it's pretty chubby looking, and many consider the myth to be taken from sailors mistaking a whale. While the Dragon Age RPG art shows a thin monster, I'm not really sold that this is what it's supposed to be depicting. Also, considering the fact that we just read through Horror of Hormak, which mentions a lot of sea-related smells, I'm immediately suspicious of that. Could this be one of the deep-sea creatures that Gillenon did not destroy? We also get another "it's a demon, but not really" thing, with little details to really explain what that means. Now, a question I had, and you may be having too, is the monster from Luck in the Garden and the locked away monster from this story the same, as Luck in the Garden is set after this story? However, there really isn't that much detail to say so. I would honestly lead towards a no, as the monster in the story isn't actually let out and is hyped up to be this giant scary thing, while the monster in Luck of the Garden is killed by two mages, a tricky rogue, and a little girl. Plus, Neve describes a need for emptiness that Hollix never talks about when close to the monster. I do also think that this need for emptiness is a huge clue to something, but at this point I don't know what that is yet. It may have some connection to the void, but other than that, I don't really have any clues. Which, assuming that it isn't the same, one wonders what horrors this monster could bring, considering the other one was pretty bad looking already. Another point is that a god, or something close to it, is supposed to be able to break the bindings. Ayla got close enough with blood magic, but still wasn't able to do it. We can debate if she would have been able to, although she seems to have been struggling with it at the end. However, she did weaken the binding enough to let some of it come through and absorb or eat someone who got too close to it. My point here is that it seems like it wouldn't be that big of a challenge for Solus to just come in and finish the job. Now, there is a mention of Justicar's coming in to help strengthen the binding, but even if that's the case, I still don't think it would be that much of a challenge. There might even be a reason for him to do so if Minrathous becomes a big enough thorn in his side. From Zach, as for the demons the Venatori failed to summon, I have a few theories on what this was. While it could be something Elven, Dwarvish, or Darkspawn alignment, I feel that it was simply a demon. We know that there are demons too powerful for even Corypheus to control, such as the Nightmare Demon in Inquisition, who he had made an allegiance with. And it could make sense that he would have had to take extra steps to bring such a demon outside of the Fade into Thedas to control it. However, the Venatori trying to summon the demon had to break seals to do this, which makes me think that this demon did exist outside of the Fade in Thedas once before but was bound and sealed away. I think this demon could have been the last of the Forbidden Ones, and possibly the one that taught the Ancient Masters blood magic if those stories are true. My only argument is that I'm not sure why the author would bring the reader to doubt that it was a demon when the answer is that it is a demon. But you bring up a good point about the blood magic. Now, there are two sources rumored to have brought blood magic to Thedas, one being the Old Gods and the other being the Forbidden Ones. Really, it could have even been both if two different people were given the secrets of blood magic around the same time. Now, this would be a great setup for the final Forbidden Ones, as the last being the Formless One does fit the shadow description of the monster in the obelisk, and a part of me hopes that this is the answer. From Joy, the last place we saw an obelisk, Legacy DLC, it was also holding back a dark power, Malvernus. Because the catacombs are just as old as Minrathous, perhaps they were once deep roads, just like Tevinter mages to take credit for work done by someone else. I had completely forgotten about that obelisk, and another good catch. Perhaps, if anything, Malvernus might be one of the first "it's a demon but not really" things we've seen in the series. Even the codex entries about it are kind of vague. If you don't remember this, it's an optional boss from the Worm Orb you pick up during the Dragon Age 2 DLC Legacy. In short, it's something that bothered a lot of the dwarves, but they were able to seal it away, trying to make sure that no one would ever release it, and then Hawk does and kills it. From BioWare Babbling, how many Venatori are left? It seems in multiple short stories they're being killed off left and right. Do you think they will be in a state similar to Cerberus in Mass Effect Andromeda, where they will only make a cameo in Dragon Age 4? I honestly couldn't tell you how many are left. Although one would assume that there would be a ton more where the movement actually started, which is Tevinter. There likely are also splinters of the group with different goals now that their leader is gone. There's probably one that liked Corypheus' goals but didn't believe he was a god. There's probably another that still worships him and awaits his return. Maybe even a third that don't really believe in either the man or the cause but see this as a way to gain power. While the Venatori might one day have the Cerberus and Andromeda level of cameo, I think they'll actually be a larger part of Dragon Age 4. If anything, a large part of Dorian and May's cause seems to be getting rid of the Venatori. So let's talk about these catacombs. Neve mentions that officially they are storage in case of a Blight or Canary invasion, although unofficially they hold a lot of dark secrets. She passes a lot of frescoes and paintings of dragons in the area too. I'm not sure why this place was built, but something bad is definitely going on here. While granted we don't have a lot of stories about this place, so far they have all been terrible. At this rate, I would be surprised if we don't come here at some point in Dragon Age 4. I'll begin with the fact that I'm not a mystery buff when it comes to books, but I do have one complaint about this mystery. There are some questions that are brought up but never answered, like who was Quentin going to meet? I assume one of the other people who had the necklace and didn't want it, but the story never really tells you. I was also expecting Neve to question or at least follow up on the ground shaking. Why did no one notice the ground shaking for Lady Verantis? Or Paxis? I would have thought that would have been a major piece of the puzzle, but it never really came up. Perhaps the shaking was limited to a small area, but then why did the ground shake when she was talking to Flavian? Did she just happen to be over where the ritual was taking place in the catacombs? Or was Aelia in just the street over killing another person? I am kind of confused on some of these bits. Again, the story was mentioned in Luck in the Garden during Dorian's card game, with one of the mages asking if the others had heard about what happened to the Wigmaker. In the bigger timeline of things, we can assume that this happens fairly close to when Streets of Minrathous takes place, as both stories are considered new gossip. So we should all be very excited to see Felicia Ehrman show up, as her brother is everyone's favorite grease bucket that helps Curvius control the Wardens in Here Lies the Abyss. We also learn that he is also the one who introduced the Wigmaker to the Venatori in the first place, which immediately makes me want to mod an awful wig for him in the game. The De La Morte family and Lucanus' fame is new to the series, so don't feel bad for not knowing who this guy is. To those unfamiliar with the Antivan Crows, the First Talon is sort of like the leader of the Antivan Crows, although really a better way to put it would just be the most powerful of the Crows. I'm not going to go too much into the Crows for the story, as another story down the line is actually about the Crows, not just two members on a job. So for now, what you need to take away from the story is that Lucanus is a very famous assassin, and while his cousin is also decent, is a better manager. The two men's grandmother is the most powerful person in the Order currently, and it's likely she will choose Lucanus to take her place, although he doesn't want it and would rather his cousin Ilario take the job. Also, the Crows seem to be taking a lot of Venatori contracts from some unknown person. From Christina, I know this is something that has been discussed ad nauseum on your channel before, but 100% all of the Antivan words in both the Wigmaker and Eight Little Talons are Italian. Although the accent that the Antivan characters have in games is Spanish, the vocabulary here is not. In The Wigmaker, Lucanus even answers Ambrose's C with an accent mark in Italian, not C, no accent mark in Spanish. While I did pick up some of the words being Italian, I had assumed C was Spanish and that they were just going to blend the two languages together or something like that, so thank you so much for the clarification on that. Christina also sent a guide on how to pronounce some of the names, so huge thank you for that as well. While we aren't really given a lot of information about this mysterious elven woman, who we later learn is named Althemia, who happens to run some sort of magical spinning underground corridor to various places in Verantium, I have to say I do want to know more about who she is and why she is there, and if she's with a local slave rebellion or perhaps something more ancient. This is just like a little, what is this? From Joy, I'll throw out the less obvious Red Jenny and Tevinter option. Could still have access to a lot of coin and magic secret passages. This is Tevinter, where there are likely a lot of magic secret passages to go around. Evidence is thin, but they're not using Illuvians. The targets are racist blood mages, i.e. nobles, and the elf, Althemia, was wearing a scarlet coat. I had not actually considered the Red Jennies, but that's a great catch on the coat color. Joy also wonders if it could be someone working with Solus or even May and Dorian taking down the Venatori, but I really like the idea of it being this third party that just doesn't like the Venatori because they were abusing their slaves or something, so a bunch of people banded together to pay for the top assassin in Antiva to kill many of the leaders. It also echoes the theme of the story, as those who wish to take vengeance on their evil masters band together to call on the Demon, which is Lucanus' nickname by the end of the story. Something that I almost completely left out of the summary was that Lucanus had been trained up to be an assassin since he was a child, and much like Zephyr notes in Origins, the training is much closer to abuse than anything. In a weird way, Lucanus believes that his grandmother trained him so harshly so that he would survive. I do think there is as much as I hate using this, problematic take here, and that some abuse can be considered a love depending on the situation. But the narrative never really says that Catalina must love her grandchildren so that she abused them to survive. It's possible that she just did so for her own selfish gains. Either way, if it is talked about that one day that Catalina loved her grandchildren and so she found the abuse valid, I don't think that actually makes a bad story. If anything, I think that makes it a believable one. A lot of abusers make this type of mental gymnastics to justify their terrible behavior. What would really make or break this type of plot would be how the meta of the narrative plays out. Lucanus might buy into this mindset, and that would be fine for his character. But if it's played like forgiveness plot rather than one of brainwashing, then there's something actually troublesome here. I also want to be on the record of this mini plot thread never actually bothering me in Tevinter Nights, although I'm not a victim of abuse either. So if anything, I'm surprised that BioWare has this little plot thread and didn't do much to touch upon it. A very small hint that the Wigmaker was using red lyrium before the reveal, like minutes before the reveal, is when the two crows go into the weird hair lab, and despite going into a basement, it gets warmer. For some reason, red lyrium is warm, and with a room full of slaves who are forced to drink red lyrium to grow their hair, it would make sense that they would generate a lot of heat. Something the fans have been wondering for years is if the elven artifacts that Solus has us turn on actually do strengthen the veil or not. And in the story, this is the first real proof that they do what he says. A lot of people like to headcanon that they're also for some nefarious purposes, although I'm not really in that camp. But just because the story says that they do strengthen the veil doesn't mean that they also don't do something else. If anything, this just confirms that Solus wasn't lying, and if they have another purpose, it's just another classic case of Solus just not telling us the whole truth. So, Zara Renata. We don't really have much on her other than what's in the story. She seems like a vain woman obsessed with her form and of those around her, as her, what I'm assuming are her slaves, are described as being no older than 35 and quite lovely themselves. However, she is also clever and has her eye on Lucanus de la Morte. This all stinks of a side quest to me in the next game, but other than that, there really isn't much to say. Now, if the name Renata is familiar to you, there is a divine Renata I in one of the Codex entries, but seeing as how the divine speaks poorly of the Imperium and that the divines usually take on new names when they're elected, I'm just assuming that there's no relation and it's just a coincidence. So continuing on with my list of most new lore to least new lore, where do these three line up? Murder by Death Mages ties with Hunger in my mind in terms of new lore, although I'm going to rank this story a little bit higher as we get to see some pieces of Navarra City and backstory to Sydney. Streets of Minrathous probably has the most of this bunch, letting us see the inner workings of the Imperium Templars, the existence of Dwarven prosthetics, and more of the Imperium catacombs, and this strange monster in the depths of the city. And a lot of that seems like it could build up to something in Dragon Age 4. So because of that, I'm going to rank it above Luck in the Gardens. While Luck in the Gardens has a lot of the same new lore, the story focuses more on those factors, minus a demon that's not really a demon, in which Luck of the Garden gives us a better look at that. But even then, the story doesn't tell us much other than it exists, and it's horrifying. The Wigmaker job, while a fun story, doesn't really tell us much about the world of Thedas, rather it seems to set up people. This is one of those stories where I'm about to rate it in the middle of the road lore-wise, but could easily drop to the bottom of the list if none of these people actually come back up again. Really, all it tells us about the world is that someone is paying the crows to kill high-ranking Venatori. Any new information on the crows is better explained later on in the novel, so for now I'm ranking this above Callback. And with that, thank you to everyone who submitted entries, and I look forward to what everyone comes up with next. If you have comments, artwork, or anything else, please send it in. Our next section consists of the stories Genitivi Dies in the End, Harold Had the Plan, and An Old Crow's Old Tricks of Tevinter Nights. So please send me your things by May 10th, 2020. Either send me an email at gildathon@gmail.com or tweet at gildathalin on Twitter. Dara Sherrill.